the creative self, personality characteristics and creative potential times 10 different things that I've given you. So remember, by the end of the session, you've had 6 things around resourcefulness characteristics, 10 ways or 10 things that adaptable people do, and we're going to finish off with 10 things that creative people do, or 10 things that you can do in order for you to be more creative. So, number 1, imagination. Imagination is central to both the creative personality and creative process. Creativity often involves fraternizing, daydreaming, and other imaginative forays. There you go. Imaginary also plays a key role in creative thinking and conceptualizing. I reckon there are some people on this call that probably got told off for daydreaming when you were at school, and so on and so on. That kind of thing is encouraged more. Obviously, it needs to be in an appropriate time. Daydreaming when you're in the middle of a lesson, maybe, and somebody's trying to teach you something, maybe you need to focus on the lesson, okay? But daydreaming is actually quite a useful thing. It's something that I encourage my 2 youngest daughters to do all the time. You know, I caught my daughter daydreaming the other day, and she was actually talking out loud in this daydream she was having. And I didn't quite get what she was doing to start with. And I went, "You're right, Delilah." And she went, "Oh yeah, did you hear what I was saying?" So she was obviously daydreaming and didn't realise that she was talking. And I said, "Were you daydreaming?" She went, "Yeah." And I went, "That's not a bad thing, darling. That's not a bad thing." I said, "You daydream as much as you want." And that's when she went, "Yeah, but the teacher tells me off for it." Okay, so maybe when you're in the lesson you need to concentrate. But when you're not, you can do as much daydreaming as you want, because we know that it starts to use the imagination part of the brain. Okay, so conceptualizing, daydreaming, you know, fraternizing with ideas, if you like, in your head. And I have covered something on these sessions before called a mind storm. If anybody wants to Google that or check out the YouTube channel, I think it's on there, on the YouTube channel on one of the sessions. Mind storming, brainstorming, sometimes it's called mind mapping, anything like that. Really, really useful. The key thing is this though. Remember, the pathways in your brain are like any other muscle that you've got on your body. When you use them, they grow. When you disuse them, they shrink. So, if creative thinking is something you don't do regularly, then you might want to start practicing it. Yeah, and you can start practicing it by learning a mind storm, learning a mind map. Yeah, looking at the next thing at work you've got coming up, looking at that next personal project that you want to get going, and so on and so on and so on. Okay, with that. So practice it, makes perfect, of course, using your imagination. It's like any other muscle in the body. You use it, it grows. You disuse it, you lose it. Okay, good. Number 2. Daydreaming again. Sorry, I thought daydreaming was part of number 1. I've put it in there as number 2 as well. Creative individuals often thought to be zoning out or daydreaming, and indeed daydreaming seems to play a key role in the creative process, as I've already mentioned there. Okay. Persistence. This is quite a good one for creative people. Creative people are persistent. They don't give up. They keep finding different ways to do things. So creative thoughts will say just that, unless acted upon. Okay, so creative thoughts are great unless you act on them. So you guys might remember the solution focused process: thinking, emotions, actions, results. You've got to do all 4 of those things to make sure that you get the results if you want a permanent result change. Loads of people can think of stuff, but then if they don't take any action on it, it won't be done. Okay? For creativity to be realized, one must take the next step, and perhaps a leap of faith. So we know that belief comes into thinking as well, doesn't it? Confidence as well as action coming into that as well. Okay? So just recap that one. Creative thoughts are great only if you take some action on the ones you want to. Otherwise, they just stay creative in your brain. thinking, emotions, actions, results. Okay, got to be done in that order. Remember, electrochemical, thinking, emotions, electrochemical, in that order. The thought releases the chemical into the system for you to be able to take some action and get some results on the back of it. The more you do it, the bigger, the quicker, the faster the results will be driven. And the bigger the new habit or habitual thing will be created. Number 4, high energy. Okay, gone too quick. High energy. High energy often comes with creative pursuits. Okay, it can take a little bit of energy to be creative. It's actually quite tiring when you do it properly, being creative. So what we need to do is make sure that that creativity is also kind of having giving us more energy at the same time. A little bit like a kind of a rolling circle. So you start here, you spend some energy being creative, okay? But because of those thoughts that are coming out, they spur you on and you get some more energy. And then that leads you to more creative thoughts and that spurs you on, and so on and so on and so on. And that's how creativity can help with energy. But it's kind of a chicken and egg scenario. Creative people generally have high levels of energy to be creative. Sometimes people think being creative is sitting, on a training course and, coming up with ideas or in a meeting. Well, yeah, that can be being creative, but it's actually quite tiring. If you've ever had to be creative all day, if you've been on a recent training course, for argument's sake, yeah, or sitting in and listening to me in one of these, yeah, if you do both of these, and we normally do 2 obviously a week, it's quite tiring to learn. It's quite tiring to use other parts of your brain that you wouldn't normally use, maybe when you're working, or at least it's exactly the same with creativeness. Okay, so if you are going to be more creative, you're using different parts of your brain. If you're going to be creative over a longer period of time, yeah, then it takes quite a lot of energy. This is why sometimes if you go on a creative thinking course, for argument's sake, what they might teach you is to be creative for a very short burst of time, maybe like 5 minutes, 300 seconds. So you're creative for a very short period of time, then you just step back for a little bit, okay? And then you go back in and you're creative again. Because being creative is really quite intense. You have to be high energy, and it does use up a lot of energy as well, but you would hope the thoughts that are coming from your creativeness would then spur more energy, and you get this everlasting kind of loop of energy and creativeness going on if you do it properly. Okay? Good. Number 4. Number 5. Independence. Okay? Creativity requires doing things differently, and a willingness to both go against the crowd and to stand apart from the common ideas while standing for one's own personal inspiration. Being creative means going against something called groupthink. So you may have heard this before. I may have talked about it if I've ever seen you face to face. I don't think we've covered a session on it actually, but groupthink is where people go with the consensus because it's easiest, or we go with the consensus because we're not confident enough to stand out. So as a trainer, sometimes you get this in a course. So one person will say something and then the rest of the course will start going down that line, okay? And it's called groupthink, but it doesn't just happen in courses. It can happen in businesses. For instance, if the CEO says something, that might condition other people to start going down that line rather than going, hang on a minute, is that the right thing to do? Do we need to challenge that? Do we need to do this? And so on and so on. So you need quite a high level of independence to be able to do that, okay? Not a high level of authority. So this isn't about level of authority in an organization and who can challenge what. This is a level of personal independence to say maybe sometimes go against the crowd and bring your case to the front rather than just falling in line with the sheep, if that makes sense. You know, the more businesses grow in the modern age, the more independent people are needed to challenge, you know, to come up with those new ideas to push them forward. Some of the best ideas I ever had as a senior manager in corporate life were from people that, you know, were newer into the business or had a fresh pair of eyes or were doing the job every day and they've been there a long time and actually nobody'd ever listened to them. And it's, but those sometimes people sometimes don't get heard unless they're independent and go, you know, 99 people say we should do it this way, and this one person says, I don't think we should because of this. So it's not just about going against the grain for the sake of it. It's about going against the grain with a business case to go, I think we should be doing something different. Okay, so creative people are independent. Number 6, creative people take risks. So this is one where it starts to worry people. This is what stops a lot of people from being creative in case they have to go outside their comfort zone, which will mean change, of course, won't it, at that point. An independent person is inherently one who takes risks. Large or small, creative brings with it at least a modicum of risk-taking, including intellectual, social, psychological, emotional, and yes, at times, physical risks. Think of the Wright brothers. Think of, for those that don't know the Wright brothers, I'm sure you do, the first people that actually made an aircraft that flew. Think of how many people told them they were crazy. How many people that said humans weren't made to fly. That's ridiculous. There's no way that you could take the weight of a human and put it in the air, and so on and so on. And they went through a considerable physical, social, intellectual, and psychological, and probably emotional risk in order to get that first plane off the floor, because there was a lot of people that would have said it wasn't possible at that point. Okay, so risk takers, creative people are. Number 7, curiosity. This comes back to the resourcefulness as well. I said I'd link these things together for you. Open-mindedness, there you go. That was the first thing in being resourceful, wasn't it? Yeah. Naturally leads to curiosity and questions, and the creative impulse inclines one towards exploration and investigation. How does this work? Why is it like that? How can we make this better? Okay, so what, why, how, who, when. Creative people are majorly curious, constantly asking questions and constantly getting new knowledge into their system. And remember as well, if they're resourceful at the same time, they're also sharing knowledge. Number 8, perception. So, creative individuals seem to have a heightened perception, enhanced experience, and aware of our 5 senses. Perhaps seeing, smelling, taste, touch, and hearing with greater sensitivity. Further heightening perception often brings with it certain key awareness of qualities and experiences that other people may not share. Often this is referred to as insight or intuition. And I don't know if anybody can see the picture here, but it's from the film Lucy. I don't know if anybody's seen the film Lucy, but it's about Scarlett Johansson's in it anyway, so that's always a good reason, but that's beside the point. She, long story short, gets the ability to increase the average brain power of 10% up to virtually 100%, and she uses all aspects of her brain, and of course her perception is, well, it goes into sci-fi to be honest, but when the brain's just getting a little bit more use, her perception is much more heightened for things. So, creative people are perceptive. They work on perception. They work on how to heighten their senses. Number 9. Creative people have a sense of humour. Okay? A sense of humour. Humour is associated with the ability to approach problems and life in a general, fresh, childlike way. Okay? If you've ever got a big problem, ask a kid. Ask a young person what to do, and they will give you a childlike, simple, straightforward version of how to fix these things. Yeah? Humour in the form of puns, satire, all that type of stuff, the imagination, topics with a twist, anything like that. You will generally find creative people also have a good sense of humour. Yeah, and we all have a different sense of humour, so good is qualitative, I understand that, but generally that's what you'll find. They're able to do that because their emotional intelligence is higher. If you've got higher levels of emotional intelligence, some of the what's perceived as the thickest comedians are actually very intelligent. If you see comedians, there's one on Mock the Week, he's got really funny hair, don't know what his name is, and he just does one-line puns, and you look at him and you just think, you know, they're not very clever, those puns, but actually they're really, really clever. And I saw him being interviewed, and he was such an intelligent person, and his emotional intelligence is high because he knows how to make people laugh. And it's the same when you're creative, high level of emotional intelligence. And then finally, number 10, creative people have an attraction to complexity. Now this is a double-edged sword sometimes. It's a good thing, which I'll tell you in a moment, but it can also be a little bit of a downside because creative people sometimes like to overcomplicate things and don't always see the simple route because of that. Creativity is not a simple concept or process. Often, creative enterprise brings discipline, styles, material, techniques, culture, geography, time periods. There's lots of things that come together with creative. Creative people tend to be drawn to complexity and may at times strike to make that switch to simple more complex. Okay, so that's just what I've said. Creative people are attracted to complexity, but sometimes that's a double-edged sword, and they struggle to make things simple then for other people, to put it into a simple format. Okay, so you just have to bear that one.